Hello, everyone. I would like to share with you some of my experiences, the most disruptive ones. Um, so the first big challenge I faced was becoming a grandmaster. Until 1987, no Indian had ever become a grandmaster. What is involved in becoming a grandmaster is simply completing a certain number of grandmaster performances. And if you finish enough performances over a certain number of games, that used to be 24, then you get the title. After that, it's like a doctorate. You keep it for life, but attaining it was a big challenge. In my first tournament, where I seriously started trying for it, I actually came very close and I missed the norm by only half a point. If I was so close in my first attempt, perhaps in a couple of attempts I'll make it. But in fact, it was much harder than that. That whole year of 1986, I kept missing the norm, sometimes by half a point, sometimes by more. But luckily, school intervened, and I had run up very close to my +2 exams, so which was going to happen in March, April, of course. And so in December, I had to stop my chess completely. And one of the pleasant things about this was that I couldn't even blame myself. Something like the +2 exams, well, what can you do? You have to turn up and you have to do it, right? So I didn't have to feel guilty about the fact that I was not spending any time on chess. And the nice thing was that in April, I don't recall another time when I was so hungry to play chess as April 1987. Having finished my school exams, I had to go and play a zonal tournament. Then I started again playing in events where I could make a grandmaster norm, and life just resumed. On the way to the grandmaster title, an even better thing happened to me. So I was trying to become the first Indian to ever become a grandmaster, and suddenly to my surprise as well, I ended up becoming the first Asian ever to win the World Junior Championship. And that was a really nice boost, because I had gone into the tournament without expecting anything. I felt there were stronger players, so I would just see how it went. But after the 5th round, I was leading. And after that, the only thing I could do and think was, well, what could possibly go wrong? This was fantastic, because this was an achievement which very, very few people had. And at that point, the last 3 world champions had all been World Junior champions. So there was even some kind of historical backup for this. Another 2 events where things didn't go according to plan. And then finally in December, I played 2 tournaments. Coincidentally, both were held in India. And I finished my title. After all the time of missing it, suddenly it came almost again too easily. Okay, now, well, what's the disruption? You went to school. But sometimes we find it difficult to take a break in our, pause in our lives, and chance to focus on my school exams was very, very good, because the next year, a lot of the doubt and hesitation in my play had simply passed. So that was one pleasant event that I remembered. Then the next question was, what should I aim for after this? A few months of being a grandmaster already told me that it's quite hard to do things without some sort of goal in front of you. So what should I do exactly? And it seemed to me that I should begin to play for the World Championship. There was really, that was the obvious thing. And because it was such a general goal, in the sense that there were like 5 or 6 hurdles that had to be crossed to get there. It's not just one event. I had to first qualify, geographically speaking, into higher and higher groups. Then I would have to become one of the last 16. The last 16 would play knockout matches. Still one player was remaining, and this player would challenge the world champions. I had a couple of very wonderful years, the way I remember it, because as a young grandmaster and as a world junior champion, a lot of doors were opening for me. I had very pleasant invitations, opportunities, chances, and so on. And steadily, I was making progress. Once again, in 1990, I suddenly had this jump, which was I played the Interzonal. I felt I would still need a lot more experience. And out of a 14-round event, by round 9 or 10, I was somewhere in the middle, lost in the pack. But suddenly I had 3 wins in a row. And lo and behold, I found myself only needing a draw to qualify for the last 16 of the World Championship. The connection I see between these 2 early successes is simply the fact that sometimes you need to give things a chance to work themselves out. You focus on getting better, you focus on doing what you do, and you have the patience and the confidence, and things will work out as long as you're enjoying yourself and you're moving forward. Then the first big change, well, of course, it was a global change, but it had a particular resonance in chess, was the fact that at the end of 91, the Soviet Union disappeared. Initially, it seems like there was a lot of competition because you could be number 8 or 9 in the Soviet Union and you'd still be one of the best players in the world. So imagine all of them suddenly traveling around, trying to play tournaments. Some emigrated, started working with youngsters. A big kind of change in the chess world happened. And I made friends with a lot of them. I mean, initially, they were kind of mysterious world to me, but I made friends with a lot of them. In fact, most of my best trainers were people who grew up in the Soviet Union and then moved to other countries. I worked with one friend who was in Belgium, one who was in Germany, one who was in Spain, interacted a lot. I gained a lot of knowledge from them, including how to think, how to learn. And this opportunity would simply have been lacking 2 to 3 years before. So change sometimes it's not only how many doors it closes, it's also how many doors it opens. Another big change was starting to appear. This was the computer revolution. By this, I mean this trend of first everyone having a computer to work with. And then around about 93, 94, I joined some private, somebody told me if you join this group called CompuServe, they post every week all the games played in the world and they're collecting all that. And so I started to work with that. At that point, it just seemed like a wonderful thing. I was, let's say, a little bit relaxed or lazy, and I didn't like inputting a lot of games and putting in a lot of material. But here, all I had to do was to import the stuff into my computer and I could work on it. And the first chess playing engines appeared, of course, very, very weak, but you could use them at roughly the level that we use calculators in our life, which is just to make sure the boring stuff, you error check or something like that. But in about 2 or 3 years, they became strong enough to beat us in the faster time controls. Then another 2 years later, they got strong enough that they actually beat the best chess players in matches. And by the end of that decade, they had simply stopped losing to humans. I mean, man versus machine contests essentially disappeared around about 99, 2000 because there was no interest, there was no point. This was disappointing because at the beginning, it seemed like just something useful and made you more productive, nice thing. But here, suddenly, it changed everything. First of all, it meant that you couldn't rely on your natural understanding for everything anymore. Generally, before, if I felt that I knew something better than my opponent, I could rely on that and I could go to the game confident that I'd probably be able to outplay my opponent. But now I had to take into account, well, wait, what if the computer suggested something that overrules? So I had to incorporate that into my learning. So by the year 2000, we couldn't, we had to think up an idea and then just give it to the computer to see what it would tell us. Was it right or wrong? Was there a detail we left out or not? And then a few years later, we got to these artificial intelligence neural nets. And those completely started to rewrite the whole game and the way we played it. And so this whole time, it's not so much that the computers are stronger than us. At some point, it becomes a question of, is this plane faster than that plane? But that's irrelevant from a human's perspective, because the most primitive plane was much faster than us already. And the other thing is because the computer almost always tells you that some part of your understanding of chess is wrong. This also, there's a lot of ego involved. There's a lot of internal resistance to, even emotional resistance, I'd say. If there's something I learned when I was 17 years old from my first opponent or something like that, this has an emotional component to it. And when the computer contradicts that and you have to do things differently, it's hard the first time and you resent it. You try to prove it wrong. You spend a lot of time like that. But once you finally get past that, you find that it's a powerful thing. The ability to take all the things you know and say, wait, I'm not sure about this. I'll keep an open mind and let me see what I can learn from this. That attitude is the most important thing that you can have. Of course, it was a huge disruption. In fact, computers have rewritten the world of chess, so to speak. But at the same time, I would say that because it happened slowly, we had time to adjust. There are other moments where something happens in your life which totally comes out of the blue, and you're unprepared for, and then it's on you, and how do you recover from those? I remember one particular. It was when my mother passed away. So there was no sign of. She was not particularly ill or anything. We spoke quite nicely the previous day, and then suddenly one morning my father called me and said, "Come quickly." And that was one of the hardest things that you can ever deal with. There is no way you can imagine that till it hits you. And the problem was just how to find some, meaning to your life in that stage. Somehow nothing seemed very important anymore. You would almost give anything else to get a chance to be with her again. But at the same time, life has to continue. As cruel as it sounds, you have to put it aside and move on. And I think at an emotional level, that's probably the hardest thing that I've dealt with. My first tournament, I would literally feel quite cheerful when I went for the game. So I was able to block thoughts out during the game. But then when I got back, you'd fall apart again at in the privacy of your room. And this was a recurring process. It's not something you can train for, and obviously, but I just mean to say that that kind of emotional turmoil as well can affect you for a very long time. And your ability to, put it in park it in one part of your life and then move on is how you deal with it. And finally, let's come to one of the biggest disruptions of all, which is this pandemic. There has been nothing that I can compare it to in my life. Despite all the travel I've had and all the events I've witnessed. First of all, in January this year, if you'd asked me to predict, I don't think if I had 1,000 tries, I would have come up with a scenario like this, even though the concept has been floating around. But it feels like, one of these movies about an asteroid hitting the Earth. It's so unlikely you can't take it seriously when you think about it. And this, even more than a school exam, it has the feel of something which stops your life. But in a way, it's nice that you don't have to blame yourself for this. This was simply one of those things above and beyond us. You don't have to feel guilty about anything, but you still have to decide how you're going to go forward. I thought to myself, well, every year I tell myself, oh, it'd be nice if I spend more time with the family. I took things a little bit easier. So let me do that. And I actually at least managed to do a little bit of that. That's maybe the positive thing here. The second thing is, it's very nice sometimes to step back. And a step back is not stopping your career. It's more in the range of pausing and letting your brain put its affairs in order. There's a lot of stuff always going in our heads. And when you have some time, sometimes you get some clarity and things work out. So it's not clear when the pandemic will come to an end, even though it at least appears that there are some signs of hope. But by now, I think, get as much useful work done. Don't have unrealistic ideas of what you can achieve. Just because we have 6 months doesn't mean we're going to do thing. I mean, all of us know that just because we had 6 months before our school exams, we didn't do a better job than otherwise. There's a certain float, there's a certain way of motivating ourselves and a way of working, which will always take precedence. But one day, things will return to normal. Just like we couldn't predict when things would shut down, we cannot predict when things will open up either. But one day when things get back to normal, then we must be ready to start again. So I think the main thing is to understand that it's very hard for us to predict and write very precise plans, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do the things which will be right in almost all scenarios. Learning new things is never going to be a wrong decision. Taking time out to feel better about yourself is never going to be a wrong decision. So those are the sort of things we can do now. And hopefully that's the way forward. At least that's what I'm working on right now.